you for giving me a little bit of your time today, and thanks for the kind introduction there, Burke. Yeah, so by way of introduction, my name is Jay Nathan, as Burke said. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, not to be confused with Charlotte, North Carolina, which many of you probably fly through. But I've been in the SaaS space for a while. Worked with a company down here called Blackbaud, where I handle a number of aspects of the client services and customer success functions, as well as did some time in product. A company called People Matter, where I was Senior Vice President of Customer Success there. And then back in 2017, founded a company called Customer Imperative, and we focus on helping our B2B SaaS clients create customer-centric approaches to driving their value and value for their customers. And so, as Burke said, our mission is to help scale revenue by deploying those teams, processes, and automation that are really customer-centric. And so I founded the company in 2017 because I saw a massive disconnect in experience between departments within some of the organizations that I've worked in. B2B SaaS, I like to call the ultimate team sport because it takes so many different people of different backgrounds and skill sets to make a well-oiled SaaS machine run. And ultimately, it's all in the pursuit of us playing offense and not defense with our clients and really driving relationships forward. So that is a little bit about us, and we're here to talk about today, where does customer success live and who should own annual recurring revenue, both renewal and expansion components of that. And so I think that this is probably a very well-attended webinar because this is one of the hottest topics that I continuously hear discussed in the customer success circles. But what we've done is created a couple of models that we use as starting points with our clients for how to think about that question, and actually these two questions. So I think, once we take a look at these, my goal is to help explain some of the discrepancies that we hear on either side of the discussion, and maybe provide some clarity and a good starting point. A lot of people will tell you that it depends, and it does depend. There's a lot of different factors that go into this decision. But I think we can get a little bit deeper on this question and provide a couple of good starting points that make a lot of sense.
Hey, Jay, is it okay if I give a poll real quick and ask them, of all the attendees, who does your customer success team report to right now? Let me just launch that real quick. So perfect. You can see right now, where does your customer success team report to? Is it the chief revenue officer? Is it the CEO? Is it the vice president of sales? Is it the chief operating officer? Is it the CMO? Or is it other? And if it's other, maybe type in the chat window who you're reporting to, because I see quite a few that are attending are reporting to another person. We'll give this about a few more minutes, a few more seconds actually, and then we'll move on. Cool, so it seems like we're seeing Director of Customer Success. Nice, good. Client Services Manager, right on. Okay, so it looks like at the top, other, coming behind that is the CEO. And let me launch this and maybe I can make it public. Let me share the results to everyone. So here are the results we saw from that survey. CEO, 28%, other at 33%, then the VP of Sales, Chief Revenue Officer. So that kind of gives us a nice feeling of where everyone is, who's reporting to who, as we start this discussion. Thanks, Jay. Let's get you back to your topic.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great insights here. And not surprised to see a lot of people in this role reporting into the CEO, which give you a little sneak preview. That's something we really like. Great. So as we think about what it means to own the customer, this is always where we like to start, because there are some key things that we just have to do with our customers no matter what. And some of this is obvious, right? We have to book new logos. The sales engine is a big piece of how we get value into our companies. We have to onboard new customers. It's probably the most effective and important interaction that we'll have from a customer success perspective with our clients. We have to drive adoption and value. We have to renew. We'd be crazy not to try to upsell and expand into our client base, right? Because we work so hard to get these accounts. Now, what are we going to do with them? We're going to provide them value, but if we can grow them, we'll just be able to provide that much value to them and create that much more value for our businesses. And then ultimately, we need to build brand advocates. And that's important because it's part of the flywheel that helps the customer success engine continue to run, as well as the new sales engine continue to run. So the real question is, how do you measure each of these activities? And so from a new logo perspective, we're always talking about bookings, right? And this is your sales team. But onboarding, time to value, the satisfaction with that interaction, adoption rates, NPS. So these are all metrics that we use to apply to the different interactions we need to have. Now, these are high level, so we're going to go deeper in just a little bit. And I'm going to show you some other things around how to think about these interactions and the supporting activities that happen underneath them. But the measurements are really important because we assign teams to these things, and teams are made up of people who have skill sets in very specific areas. And so those skill sets lend themselves to being able to achieve these metrics and these outcomes. So I'm still setting you up here for a little bit. So let's go on to the next slide. The way that we think about the two models that we start with for customer success really follows what we call relationship complexity. Okay, and so if you've been in a company that sells a product to what I would consider maybe a low complexity kind of client, maybe a departmental solution, the buyers might be the same as the users. It may be a point solution, purpose fit for one specific part of a process or one specific process. It may be self-service in nature. And then, I always hesitate to put guidelines out there that are this specific, but ARR being maybe less than 25K is a good guide point for us in terms of how we think about low complexity types of customer relationships. So we would refer to that type of customer relationship as a transactional or inside customer relationship. On the high complexity side, this is more of what you think of as your typical enterprise sale or your enterprise customer. So you're going to have multiple stakeholders. You probably have a number of influencers on the purchase that are different than the actual contract signer. You may be selling a suite instead of an individual function or individual department level product. There's going to be a much bigger change management curve to come up for this client. It's a bigger adoption process, and it takes more services, perhaps from our team or a third party, to deliver this type of solution. So we normally think about that as an enterprise or an outside type of client. And so the key point here is that as relationship complexity increases, so do our customer engagement needs. So I'm going to talk a lot more about that in just a couple minutes. When we go in to look at a company's customer success program, we look at both the sales velocity or the relationship complexity relative to how early or mature the SaaS company is. So early on, we're really driving, we're doing a lot of learning, right? If you're below 10 million in ARR, you're still probably adjusting your product market fit. You're probably still spinning up your sales engine and getting that thing tuned and humming. But by the time you become a growth stage company, so probably north of 10 million, but below 100 million, you're really pouring fuel on the fire of your sales engine and scaling your customer success efforts. You've learned what works. Now it's time to really drive scale and volume through that system. And then mature, you're probably at this point, and usually it does happen earlier for most companies we work with, but at this point you're definitely working across maybe both a transactional and an enterprise model because you've addressed a lot of the needs in your market, and you're really trying to optimize and drive the right engagement across your entire segmentation. So we're going to focus most of our time here on the growth stage. My gut is that that's where many of you guys fall in terms of where your companies are, probably a lot in the early stage as well. The good news is you can think about these models relative to where you are today, and they'll give you a good guidepost to, for how to think about where you're going in the next year, 2, 3 years ahead. Okay. So I'm going to walk through a couple of the two models that I've been referencing, and we're going to start with transactional. So you can go ahead and forward in the slides. So when you have a transactional type of business, and again, by transactional, what I really mean is you got a high volume of lower dollar clients, okay? We really are challenged to drive everything to scale here. The low dollar amounts that our customers spend with us really help to throttle the amount of human contact that we can have with these accounts. As you all know or may know, human cost for human resources, or the talent that you have on your team, is one of the biggest costs that any SaaS company is ever going to have on an ongoing basis, and it's the thing that impacts your gross margin the most, typically. So, really, looking across the entire customer base, which may include hundreds or thousands, in most cases thousands of clients, how do we surface the right opportunities at the right time? How do we make sure we know which clients are at risk? How do we drive adoption at scale and make that process as simple as possible? Automation is key in this area. Triggered engagement. You're probably putting a knowledge base support structure in place. You're maybe even building a lot of the onboarding and customer engagement tools right into the product itself. So what we normally recommend here is to have a CSM team that is part of the overall post-sale customer experience team. So you'll see in the org chart that we've depicted here, sales sits off to the left. As soon as a new deal is closed, we transition that over to the client success team, where they're onboarded, they're provided an overview of support, and then the CSM owns both the retention and the renewal of those customers, as well as upsell. The reason we put that on there is because, or that we put that on the CSM team in this model, is because the overall relationship, again, is less complex. So there are fewer stakeholders. If you have, we see companies all the time, and this is, a good discussion point, but we see companies that put a sales account manager on the deal, on the account to drive upsell, and have a CSM to drive adoption in this world. And the client gets confused, right? They don't know who they're supposed to talk to for what. Sometimes the messaging is not kept real well aligned. So what we've found is that if you have the supporting tools, and it's important to create those supporting tools, like a knowledge base, like a support organization, the CSM can really be taught the things to look for within their accounts, to prioritize them, and then also to drive those right activities. The other benefit of this model is that we have less redundancy. So in a low dollar situation, if I've got both an account manager and a CSM touching my account, then my cost of sale, my cost of engagement is going way up there. We would normally recommend having a customer success leader, maybe a chief customer officer, maybe a senior vice president of customer success, whatever term your executive team and board prefers, to own this umbrella of functions within the organization. They have everything they need, they can drive the experience, and then they can drive the numbers that result from it. I know there are some questions about that particular model in the CCO conversation in particular. Burke, I don't know if now is a good time to stop and address those, or whether we should keep going and come back to it.
I think it actually is a great time. And maybe let me just ask the question. This is coming from Rebecca Lane. And her question was, do you see a trend of B2B SaaS companies appointing a CCO as the home for all post-sales client activities? And maybe that's the first question. Yep.
Yeah, so I do see a trend that direction. And again, whenever we run across this transactional sales model, it's normally the place we start because of all those factors that I mentioned to you earlier. So, so yes, I do see a trend in that direction. And, you know, more and more, you know, it really somewhat depends on how much the sales leader wants to take on in terms of commercial responsibility for the renewals. But typically, I shouldn't say typically, but in a lot of cases, it's seen as a distraction to new logo generation. So yes, Chief Customer Officer is definitely a trend that we're seeing in the market, at least as a starting point for many companies.
That's great. Thanks for answering that. One question I had for the audience, I guess, is how many of you actually have your customer support organization reporting to the customer success team? Maybe to say, hey, I do, or if customer support doesn't report up to customer success, what other department does it report up into? That's just the question I had, because in this model, sometimes you'll find that silo can be almost not even connected to the customer experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I see a lot of I-Do's here, as well as some other responses, Bert. But in my experience, the earlier stage companies typically have support reporting into product because it's highly aligned with what needs to happen anyway. Or I shouldn't even say product; it's really engineering. And so, to your point, it becomes a little bit disconnected from the overall customer experience. But to me, one of the most important things that we can do is have a really stable, solid support team for our product, or support function, I'll say. I like to call it the dial tone of the organization, because if that's not working, then we're never going to be able to do proactive customer success, because our CSMs will be too busy firefighting, and then we'll have a team of highly compensated people that are essentially, you know, solving problems with our clients that we could be paying a different tier of people to work on. So I think, you know, support is such a critical piece of the overall customer experience and product experience that our clients need to provide to their customers. And so really important to get right.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for answering that question. I love this model from a transactional side, looking at, you know, who's under customer success, reporting to the CEO. I have the CSM team who their metric is that renewal and upsell bookings. You have support who's really trying to drive this customer satisfaction. I love how the onboarding team has that focus of time to value or time to impact. And then you have, you know, the CS ops and even customer marketing in a transactional world, really focusing on getting that net retention. So great intro into this concept of where should customer success live, especially if you're a transactional business. So let's keep on going.
Yep. So just popping forward here. So back to our original activities, this is sort of what that model looks like based on the org chart that I just showed you and some of the challenges that we need to solve for. Again, adoption and sort of value validation. As much as we can automate those things, it's going to help this whole model work better. But if we can automate that, then we don't have to have duplicate teams doing both of these types of activities within the accounts. We can automate more and more of it. So that's the low velocity or transactional model. We'll pop ahead now to. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll go back one slide. On this model, what would you suggest the attendees do, these customer success professionals all over the world, to get alignment on this, on who does what? Like, have you just said, hey, let's get in the room and let's talk about this? Do you have any advice you would give them on how do they set up this alignment and ownership?
Yeah, great question, Burke. And we know a consulting firm who can definitely help answer that question. But just kidding. So we have a tool that we're going to share later on to help you work through this, these questions and gain alignment. And to your point, it's really all about gaining alignment at the most executive levels of the organization to figure out where these things should live. So this is a conversation that really truly must go on at the executive level. And my suggestion is to get to the right answer, you really need to focus it around the customer. If we can keep it focused on the customer and the customer journey and what we need to do from an engagement standpoint to make that work, and drive the outcomes that we want, then you can't get it wrong.
Awesome.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment.
I mean, before you go into the next, we'll keep this slide up, the transactional slide. Let me ask everyone in attendance today, a big question out there right now is who owns the renewal? So let me put up a poll real quick that helps us kind of maybe get some, let me see here. Let me pull up the second poll here. So, and let me launch this. So who owns the renewal in your organization? Is it your sales team, the account management team, the customer success team? Do you have a specific renewals team? Is it someone else? And maybe as they do that, Jay, a question I have for you, if there's someone out there that's trying to figure out the difference between an account management role and customer success, how would you define those two?
Well, I'm actually going to talk about that in just a minute on the enterprise model here. And so I'm eager to see if this resonates with folks, because I think it really is the difference between how we should be thinking about this. But so should we go ahead forward, Burke, while the results are coming in there? And I can sort of address that.
I just shared those. It looks like majority of the people that are on this webinar, which I would say represents kind of the customer success community, is about 46% of the people are owning the renewal on the customer success side. And then you have a balance of 27%, which is from sales, 14% from account management, and 8% have a renewals team. So I'll stop sharing and we'll move forward. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the customer success geek in me really wants to know that 46% of folks who own the renewal and customer success, what kind of model they are, transactional or enterprise. So that would be an interesting follow-up question. So this starts to hit on the difference between account management and customer success, at least as how we've defined it. So in an enterprise model, a little bit different, right? You have some different challenges. You have a lot more relationships to deal with. You have different influencers within the organization. You may have a lot more opportunity within these accounts, because sometimes, you sell to Fortune 500 companies that have lots of separate divisions that can all be, harvested for new business. If we lose an account in this world, it hurts a lot worse, right? They're big dollar accounts, 6 figures and above at times. Just a lot bigger lift to drive the change management in the organization, because there's a lot more people that we need to influence, educate, and get indoctrinated into the value that we're trying to provide, or the impact we're trying to have on the business with our solution. So from our perspective, customer success looks a little bit different in these organizations. Adoption and value demonstration, or impact demonstration, as Bert calls it, which I really like, is more of a full-time job here. So what we typically do as a starting point in these types of organizations is we will separate the CSM team. There's typically already an account management team, because the executive team has seen the value of transitioning the new logos off of the new logo reps, because we want them to stay focused on new logos. But also providing account management to handle the commercial aspects of that relationship. So handling the renewal, handling what we call walking the halls of the organization to get to know additional people so that we can drive expansion sales. In this model, the CSM and the account manager are really two in a box. They're really focused on the same outcome, which is we want to expand our customers, our existing customers, and we also want to make sure they all renew. So gross renewals and net renewals. And so that's typically how we think about these two roles in an enterprise setting. You may hear CSM called TAM, Technical Account Manager. That's a role that I've had before in my organization, and that I've come across a good number of times. And actually, we're implementing a TAM role right now in a company that we're working with. But the idea here is that it's much more of a product expert and adoption expertise type of role. So still incentivized by the same outcomes, just on a different basis. So while account managers might be bonused or comped exclusively on quota attainment for bookings, the CSM would be comped on net retention or net renewals. Okay, so we've got a bigger services presence here. We've got a support team, just like we did in the last model that I showed, and customer marketing as well to help drive the awareness, post sale of everything that we're doing at the company. So again, in this case, the customer success organization in most growth stage companies reports right up to the CEO, but the mix of responsibilities is just a little bit different. So we'll pop into the next slide, and you can actually see what that looks like. Well, the primary responsibility belongs to the folks in the dark green here. The guys in the light green are really going to be supportive. And actually, even on the new logo sales side of things, a CSM, an account manager, services could play a supporting role in new sales. Now, there is another model that sits on top of this, which is really your key accounts model, which is where you have really, really big clients, and the sales will keep that account afterwards. So in that case, sales and account management may actually be combined into one. So that's
sorry, one question.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
In the world where you have the account manager who's actually focusing on the sales side, bookings, upsells, what would you recommend to the audience on how to maintain a relationship? Like, how do they build a relationship when maybe some other functions like the CSM or another group has really been, driving impact, and then sometimes the account manager may just show up and say, hey, you want to book, you want to upsell. Is there any advice you give the audience to do that? So it's not just hey, I'm here to make money, or is that the right approach?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So a couple of answers to that. I think one is, everybody talks about QBRs, or what we like to call executive business reviews, because they might not always be quarterly. The account manager should play a prominent role there, and also they should be involved with that customer journey along the way. And I think this is it's a good opportunity to think about where they should plug in. So what we'll actually walk you through in just a second here is a racing matrix of at a very high level, but an example of a racing matrix so you can see what it looks like, where we actually assign who's doing what. And the goal should be, we should assign the account manager something to do, some communication to have, some touch point to have. Maybe it's part of an executive touch point. They arrange that with the client, just so they're there when they're not trying to sell, so that it doesn't feel weird when they do come in to help sell. In my experience, the best account managers they partner with the client, and they think about the client's outcomes, and they really are working closely with the rest of their team to help drive those outcomes, drive executive touch points, keep a cadence of communication in place so that nobody gets surprised and it's not awkward to have anybody in the room. Does that make sense? That answer your question, you think, Burke?
Yeah, I think that's a great insight into maintaining that mix. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll pop forward here one more slide, and really, how you get to the right answer for your organization. My hope is that these two models resonate with you one way or the other. You may have a mix, right? But at least you can think about these from a starting point perspective. But what we found is that the way to get to the right answer is, first, you start by segmenting your customers and try to understand what their needs are based on the customer journey you need to provide them, so that you can achieve your outcomes and your goals as a company. So mapping the customer journey, identifying the key activities and outcomes, and then assigning clear owners to those things. Again, we want to automate where we can. Metrics become very important in this when you take this approach, because we want to have our team aligned to the outcomes that we need and that our customers need. And then I guess the only thing I'd say here is what we see a lot of as we work with the companies that we do, and we've worked with about 30 companies over the past 2 years, is just a lot of iteration and refinement of the model once it's in place. You're always going to be working on the people, the job profiles, the processes. Things change so quickly in the markets that we serve as SaaS companies that you really have to be nimble and agile and continue to iterate on your model. So real quickly, I'll pop forward here to show you what a racing matrix looks like. So we have a download. We're going to provide this to everybody. It's just a spreadsheet, nothing magical. But what this does, you can see down the left-hand side, it goes through the major phases of a client relationship. From all the way on the pre-sales, acquisition side to the provisioning, new client, onboarding, adoption, and then ultimately renewal, upsell, and expansion. And it tries to assign by the roles which go across the top, who is responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed during all these activities. So this is the exercise that Burke was referring to earlier, that if you can drive your organization through a discussion and document the discussions that you have in this way, it becomes a really powerful tool for making sure that, A, you have everything covered. We see a lot of companies that drop the ball because they think one of the other departments within the organization has a certain activity covered, and they don't. And then it just creates a lot of alignment across the team. So we'll provide this tool. I hope it's of value to folks. We use it often with our clients, but we've also just provided it to clients to use on their own, and they have a lot of success with it. So we'll provide this afterward. So takeaways. Customer success really follows the sales motion, which is determined by relationship complexity. Transactional relationships are much different than enterprise relationships. Number two, you got to build around the customer journey. Use that as your central point. If you keep the customer as your guiding North Star, it's really hard to go wrong, right? And if you're really intellectually honest about what you need to do to drive your engagement, your relationship with them, resulting in renewal, resulting in upsell, then you're not going to go wrong. And then, really, the CS team has to be accountable to revenue in either one way or the other in either one of those models. Revenue is the ultimate outcome for a SaaS company, right? It's the metric we're all shooting to drive and increase. But there are slightly different leading metrics, whether it be adoption in the enterprise model and CSAT in the enterprise model, or NPS in the transactional model. So I hope this has been helpful. This is, evolving, as you know. Looking forward to hearing more from you all about how you're organizing around this and how you're thinking about this, and hopefully, that our models match some of what you're seeing out there. You can feel free to contact me anytime on any of these channels, and would love to chat with you more about this. We love talking about these topics. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Burke, and I think we're going to do a little bit of one more poll question and then some Q&A.
Awesome, Jay. Hey, thanks for providing those kind of frameworks to the answers of those questions. I think sometimes it's kind of we're just maybe basing it on gut or something else, and so I think it's been very great to see the thought process behind where should customer success live. We've talked about the transactional enterprise and who owns that renewal. One question, I have a few questions I'm going to ask you, but one of them, what happened? What do you feel like? There are a few people that have asked me directly, what if they just haven't got the number yet? Customer success is really just this adoption team. How would they start the process to really get that number and that ownership of revenue?
Yeah, good question. So I think first and foremost, take an interest in it. And when I say take an interest in it, I mean, when you report adoption numbers for your customer success team or customer health, associate the revenue value with the segment that you're looking at. So if you're doing a red, yellow, green type of scoring across your customer base, how much revenue is associated with red? The more you can tie back everything you report to those really key metrics for the SaaS business, I think it just shows that the customer success team is attuned to what the executive team is attuned to and what the board is attuned to. And if you can get aligned around that, I think it makes a huge difference, Berg.
Great thought. So yeah, we're excited to go into this Q&A section. I'll keep on asking a few questions. We'll do this for about 9 more minutes, but if you have a question, put it in the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. So just from your opinion, this comes from Matt, what job functions follow under like CS ops on maybe a day-to-day level? Like they saw that in one of the models, the transactional side. What are they doing? What's their day-to-day look like?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of what I just mentioned around having revenue mapped to specific customer success data tracking and segmentation, I think is really important. Also, those processes that are, we rely on everybody to do and to set up and make sure that they're happening on a regular basis. CS ops can really help drive the codification of those processes in a system. So whether it be, ClientSuccess or another CS platform, even your CRM, like how are we if we want everybody to do an executive business review on a quarterly basis with our enterprise clients, how are we making sure in some kind of system that happens? I'll tell you, we've spent a lot of time designing processes that never get implemented because the systems weren't in place to handle the execution of those processes and to drive those processes. And that's across my entire career. So we've gotten really laser focused on making sure that not only do we define the ideal kind of execution process that we want, but making sure that it ends up in a system somewhere. And the CS ops person is absolutely responsible for that, down to managing the platform that it's running on.
Great insights. Great question. This one comes from Tom. Tom asks, if you have a mixed model, both enterprise and transactional, with renewals and upsell expansion reporting into both cells, and the transactional CS team gets the revenue, or excuse me, let me read this again. If you have a mixed model, enterprise and transactional, with renewals and upsells and expansion reporting into both cells, and in the transactional case, CS, who owns the revenue?
It goes by segment at that point. Frankly, it's a little cleaner to have one or the other model in place with a little variance based on for those activities based on where the predominant level of business is. I'm sure the next question is, well, they're balanced 50-50. How do we think about it? In that case, you may lean more towards sales because you have to continue to drive the renewal and the expansion number. But a good way to think about it, first of all, you got to model it. You want to model these things so you understand what your upsell opportunity is. And again, as long as we can keep it from distracting new logo sales, that's a fine answer to put it with sales. But yeah, so at that point, you got to go with the skill sets that you have, is my thought on that.
Yeah. Great thought. Let me see what else. We got a lot of great questions coming here. This is from Raphael. During the journey of a customer, there are times that churn is higher than usual, like the renewal phase. Does it make sense to adjust goals, net churn during those times for the CS group?
Well, the way that I think about renewals is that, and maybe this is old school, but the only way that you should be able, if you have a contract, you really should only be able to cancel your contract at renewal. Now, I know there's probably 250 people laughing at me right now saying that, but I think, you shoot for a renewal target that is on par with what the company is budgeting for gross renewal. And then you reward the team for exceeding that. And obviously, you don't pay out fully if you don't exceed that. But in my experience, you really have to align incentives of the team and the right people who are motivated by those kind of outcomes to drive those metrics. And again, sales does not have to be a 4-letter word. It's really, we're driving a two-way exchange of value with clients or customers in most cases. And so really, if we think about that that way, it's a lot easier to think about how you drive those metrics through the team.
Great thought. Thanks a lot. Another one regarding the race team metrics. How detailed, this is coming from Ryan, how detailed do you think this should be, the metrics for other organizations?
I would actually start with the big questions, which are the first 6 or 7 activities that we had there. What you'll quickly find as you go through that process is that once you map the customer journey, there are a number of things that's just not clear. It's not clear who needs to do what. So, for example, when I'm onboarding a new customer, who should actually introduce the CSM and when? Once you get alignment on what the CSM owns from a metrics perspective, which facet of the relationship that they own, it's pretty important to get to that next level of detail pretty quickly, or you don't have a process that's repeatable, and you certainly can't put it into a CS automation platform to drive and execute. So I think it's pretty important to go down to the process level on this. And once you do, you'll find all kinds of misalignment that you need to make adjustments to.
That's a great thought. Keeping it on these customer activity measures that you have here, just who owns what, who's doing what. And we talk a lot that customer success is really not just a department, but it's an overall company strategy. And the more and more we can get aligned from the marketing side, the sales side, the customer success, and how our model is built, the more we can work together as a group to drive customer success, which drives emotional impact, rational impact. We all know how it feels when a company has an awesome experience, their product delivers, and it's fun to be part of those organizations. So I appreciate you answering that. Let me ask, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. This is from Anthony. What other types of activities besides owning the kickoff and conducting an enterprise board review, or an EBR, do you recommend AMs have an enterprise model?
I'm sorry, was that account managers it sounded like account managers in the enterprise model, correct?
Yeah, besides maybe owning the kickoff and conducting like an EBR, what other activities would you recommend they're doing in an enterprise model?
Yep. So keep in mind, one of the key roles that team member is playing is to deepen our relationship with the organization that's our customer. So they're looking to expand the individual relationships that we have across the organization. You've probably heard the term high and wide, going high and wide. A lot of that is one-on-one relationship building. And the reason that's important is because one of probably the top 3 reasons we see across our clients for why their customers churn is loss of champion, loss of sponsor champion. And we don't want to be in the position of only having one relationship or a relationship with just a user group and procurement within an enterprise organization. We really want to have multiple points of contact. So just like when we're trying to sell the deal in the first place, we have a targeted strategy for how we're going to remain in that account.
Great thoughts. Hey, Will, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Customer success is a culture. I think Jay did a great job in the customer imperative group in helping us have some models from a transactional side, lower ACV values, and this enterprise side. We'll be making this recording available to everyone. We appreciate you joining today. And we wish you the best day wherever you are. Thanks, Jay, and everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.